Why are we in the situation of a shortage right now?
So we're in the situation of a shortage because Pfizer, who is the manufacturer of both the EpiPen and the EpiPen Junior, is having manufacturing issues at their plants, and so there's already been a limitation in supply of both those products. And in the last recent past, there's been more issues that's led to a shortage of the EpiPen, the one that's used for adolescents and adults. And it's now to the point where during the month of August, there actually may not be any supply at the pharmacy level. So that's why we're communicating with people to let them know that there's been a shift in the last few months in terms of the supply of the EpiPen product.
Does this tip you guys off at all in terms of anything that can be done to prepare for similar situations in the future?
Well, I think that's a good question, but it's a broader question in terms of drug shortages. Obviously, when we have a shortage situation, there's a number of factors that go into that. Some of them are very unpredictable. So if there is a manufacturing issue that comes up, sometimes that's often not able to be predicted. But when you're in a situation where you only have one supplier of a product, and it may just be one manufacturer, or maybe places where they have contracts and they only have one supplier for that contract, or limited numbers of manufacturers in the marketplace, then when you do have an issue, it's something that actually reaches the patient. So it's good to have a number of different sources of different products, a number of different manufacturers if you can, and have the products that are available used appropriately so you can avoid a shortage situation.
Any semblance in terms of how long this shortage might continue?
Well, we know the immediate concern is really for the month of August, and so that's where there may not be any supply at the pharmacy level. We are been told by Pfizer that by the end of August they should be able to supply some product. There's a shipment that's been delayed that needs to be inspected, and that's expected to go out at the end of August. Beyond that, there's ongoing supply constraints on the product, so we're looking at least supply being tight for the next few months, maybe into the new year.
And what's a good way for those who are in need of EpiPens to deal with that? Is there anything that they can do?
Well, there's a few things that just sort of immediately. I mean, I think first of all, if people have EpiPens, this is a good time to go and just make sure you know where it is. Check the expiry date on it and take a look at the product. The fluid in that cartridge in the product should be clear. So if it's cloudy or discolored, don't use it. But be aware of where your product is, and what the expiry date is. And just a reminder for people on the expiry date that if the expiry date says August 2018, for example, it doesn't expire at the beginning of the month. That expiry date is at the end of the month. So that's the first part. Just know where your EpiPens are. The second part of it is if you have, normally people will have backups. So potentially for kids, there might be supplies at home, there might be supplies at school or at camp, etc. If you're replenishing a supply for your backup, we're asking people to hold off. And if you have one unexpired product, then hold off on buying any others for the time being. And this is really to make sure that whatever supply is there can go to the people that need it the most. And then lastly, if you are in a situation where you only have a product that's expired, and especially if it's recently expired, and you're having an anaphylactic reaction, we don't usually say use expired products, but in an emergency situation, we're saying use that product and call 911 immediately.
Is there anything that those who use EpiPens or who need to use them can do to, I guess, take the level of their need for it down?
Well, I mean, the thing is that it's an unusual treatment. It's an unusual medication, right? It's not like a blood pressure pill that you need to take every day or an antibiotic that you take for a period of time. It's one of those things that you have in the case that you have an allergic reaction. And for people who have EpiPens, these are people who have already been identified to have had an anaphylactic reaction in the past. So they've been exposed to something and they've had a severe reaction, or they've been exposed to something and maybe they've had a less severe reaction, but something that's still concerning, and so their healthcare professional has told them to have that product. So the best thing to do is avoiding having anaphylactic reactions. So if you know that you're having, that you have exposures to, whether it's certain foods, just to make sure that people are very diligent if they're outside of their usual routines, that they're, asking to make sure what's in different products are going to places where they can be assured of what they might be ingesting. For example, if you are somebody who has an anaphylactic reaction to bees or wasps, then you would take precautions if you're going to be outside. So it's really around avoiding those anaphylactic reactions or those types of reactions. Now, most of the time people aren't aware. They're not purposely putting themselves in a situation where they're going to have a reaction. And in the case of having a reaction, then, immediately if you're starting to feel those symptoms, people might otherwise wait until they're sure that they're having a full reaction. But if you're starting to have a reaction and your lips start swelling or your tongue starts swelling and you don't have an EpiPen that's around that's not expired or recently expired, or you don't have access to one, call 911 immediately. Those are sort of practical things that people can do.
Last question for you. What are tips for parents at this time?
Well, I think the first thing is to not panic. Like most people who are requiring EpiPens have them. They, are usually very diligent about making sure that they have product, that it's not expired. And so for parents right now, I would say, check your child's EpiPen. If you need one, check it. It's just for this period of time, for this next month, that if you don't have to go and get an additional supply or you don't have to get an EpiPen, we're asking people to hold off so that the limited supply can go to where it's needed. But, otherwise, it is the summertime. We're hoping people enjoy their summers. They should just take their usual precautions, be diligent, but we just wanted to make sure that people are aware of this shortage so that, as we said, we really want to make sure that people can be safe and that people who need it have the medications that they need to avoid serious complications from the reactions.